Hi all, welcome back to Computer Organization course. We'll get started. So today we will start our discussion from this question, that is describe indexed addressing with examples. Okay, the answer is here, this one, 2.4.3, indexing and arrays. Okay, so in the indexing mode, or the question would be like explain index mode with examples, or indexing and arrays with an example. Okay, so the index mode here, the effective address of the operand, the effective address of the data operand, it is generated by adding a constant value to the contents of a register. Now this register, it may be a special purpose register or it could be a general purpose register, and this particular register we call it as index register. So how do we symbolically define it as x into the bracket ri, where x is your constant or offset or displacement. Okay, so this constant is also called as offset or displacement, and into the bracket we have ri. This is nothing but the content of that particular index register. Ri is your index, okay, index register. Now this can be also written as effective address is equal to x plus the content of array, one and the same thing. Okay, this x of array and x plus array, it means the same thing. So here we should understand that the content of this particular register, that is indexed register, won't be changed even after generating effective address. The content of this register would not be changed. Now we will see the two ways of representing this index mode. So this is the one way where offset is given as a constant, and the second one, the offset is in the index register. So these two are separate diagrams. Okay, so this portion is one diagram and this is another diagram. You have to write both the things and explain them. So consider, for example, this instruction add 20 into the bracket r1 comma r2. So whenever your processor, checks this instruction, it will come to know that this is index mode. Okay, then what will it do is it has to get the operand, right? It already knows the operand, the data which is present in R2, but it doesn't know the first operand. So what it will do, first it will go to the R1 register. Okay, this R1 is your index register here. Okay, this could be R1, R2, R3, whatever. Okay, so your processor, whenever it sees this instruction, it will jump to the R1 register and it will get the memory location. Here R1 contains 1000, right? Now this 1000 is a memory location. So your processor, then it would send a request to this particular location and it would add this 20 to this location. Okay, now 1000 plus 20, you have 1020. Your processor goes to this particular location. Whenever I say processor goes to this location, that means it sends a read signal to this particular location, and the data or the operand from that particular memory location is fetched, and then it is added with the contents of R2. Okay, the another way is offset is in index register. This means we'll consider the same thing here. Now instead of the constant, here offset is in index register. That means your index register, the R1, it contains the offset or the constant. So here 1000 is a memory location and R1 content is 20, that is a offset. 1020 would be added, again we'll get 1020. Again from this location the operand would be fetched and it would be added with the content of R2. So we'll see an example here. So we'll consider this list, okay, wherein we have student marks, the student IDs and marks for 3 tests for each student. So what we have to do is for each test, so we have to add the test 1 plus test 2 plus test 3 marks and we have to store it in some memory location. Okay. So this is a arrangement, memory arrangement, where we can see that your student ID, or the details of the student would start from the location list. So here list n, list plus 4, these are all your memory locations. Okay, and the location n, it contains, here it is written as small n, that means how many students are present. For example, we'll consider only 2 students. From the list memory location, the student ID would be present for the student 1. Then list plus 4, the test 1 marks would be present. Why we have taken 4 is like, the assumption is this is 32, the word length is 32 bits. Okay, then list plus 8 will have test 2 marks for again student 1. List plus 12, it has test 3 marks for the student 1. List plus 16, it has second student's ID. Okay, and then it continues. Okay, so this thing, we can consider it as a two-dimensional array. That means a single row with 4 columns. Okay, so this list, we can consider it as a two-dimensional array, that is a single row with 4 columns. That is, the 4 columns would represent your student ID, test 1 marks, test 2, and test 3 marks. Okay, the same memory arrangement, how we can write using indexed addressing mode is like this one. Okay, now you have to explain this one. Fine. So the first thing is like the instruction move hash list comma r naught. What does this do is like, the address of this location, or this location hash list is nothing but your immediate addressing mode. So this list would be, the location would be moved to R0. Then we have clear R1, R2, R3. This means whatever the contents of these 3 registers are there, we are clearing it out. Then move n comma R4. So n is nothing but how many student records is present. So let's consider 2. Okay, n is R2. So 2 would be moved to register R4. Next, add 4 into the bracket R0 comma R1. Your processor understands this is index mode. So it will first go to R0. R0, what it has? It has list. So list plus 4 would be added and moved to R1. So what is list plus 4? So list plus 4 is our test 1 marks. Okay, that would be added to the content of R1. Then add 8 into the bracket R0 comma R2. Again, what is the value of R0? We should know that this is R0 is an indexed register and its contents would not be changed even after getting the effective address. So R0 again, it would contain list, then 8 would be added to it and that would be moved to R2. What is list plus 8? So that is the test 2 marks. So that would be moved to your R2. Next we have add 12 to the content of R0. So it becomes list plus 12, that is the test 3 marks. It would be moved to R3. It would be added with the content of R3. Next we have add hash 16 comma R0. Now the content of R0 is list and 16 is added to it. List plus 16. So here list plus 16 is the second student's ID. Okay, so you need not add this with the other registers. This is just a ID. Okay, next decrement R4. What was our R4? We had taken n as 2 student records, right? So 2 minus 1, it would be 1. Check if that 1 is greater than 0. If yes, go back to loop, right? So our value of R4 is 1 now and it is greater than 0. So we have to loop back. We have to come here and again we have to execute these all things. So this time what happens? Student 2's test 1, test 2, test 3 marks would be added with the content of R1, R2, R3. So in the first iteration, R1 was containing the test 1, test 2 and test 3 marks of student 1. In the second iteration, what will happen? That plus student 2's test 1, test 2, test 3 marks would be added and stored in these 3 registers. So then we decrement R4. So in the second iteration, so R4 was 1. So 1 minus 1, it becomes 0 and this condition becomes false. And after that, what will happen? we'll move the contents of R1, R2, R3 to the sum1, sum2, sum3 location. So what we have achieved now, we have for the students, we have calculated the marks for each test. Okay, so this thing you have to write and you have to explain. So whenever there is a question on index addressing mode, first you have to write how the effective address would be calculated. Then you have to mention this register that is called as index register. Then this is important, that is that content of RI would not be changed even after getting this effective address. Then we have to say the two ways how the indexed addressing mode would be represented. Explain this one. Then take an example and explain this one. Okay. So this much you have to write for indexing and arrays or index addressing mode. Next, the second question is explain different assembler directives. Okay. So the answer for that is assembler directives. Okay, this one 2.5.1. Okay, assembly directives or assembler directives. Fine. Let me check the question. Yeah, the same answer. For assembly directives or assembler directives, you have to write the same these things. Okay. Okay. So this assembler directives are nothing but, say suppose you have this sum EQU 200. Okay. Now this sum we call it as a assembler directive. Now the purpose of this assembler directive is that it informs your assembler that this is not an instruction and it should not execute it. This is just a statement. Okay, this is just a statement and it is not an instruction. Okay, again, so this statement, it will not even appear in the object program. So your assembler is a program that converts your source program into the machine level program, right? Whenever this happens, this particular statement should not be converted. It just informs the assembler that this particular thing has to be done. Now, such statements we call it as assembler directives or commands, and these would be used by your assembler while translating the source program into the object program. Okay, so we'll consider an example. This one, just a minute. Yeah, okay, this program, what it does is it adds 100 numbers. Okay, we have 100 numbers, so it would add the 100 numbers and the sum would be moved in a particular location. So this is the memory arrangement for that. So if you could go by these statements, you will understand. And here we have n 100, that means we are going to add 100 numbers, and here num1 till num(n) is there, so that means 100 numbers, the content would be present here, and the final sum you have to move it to this location, and from this location the program has started. Okay, now for this memory arrangement, how can we write the assembly program? Okay, before that, so whenever the assembler, it has to know, like whenever it produces the object program, it has to know some things, right? So it has to know, like your assembler has to know how to interpret the names in the program, where to place the instruction in the memory, and where to place the data operands in the memory. So these things has to be addressed, right? So we'll consider the same thing. The memory arrangement is present here for adding 100 numbers. The same thing we'll write it in a assembly language representation or a program. Okay. So these things, sum, n, num1, these are all the memory addresses. Okay. Then the actual operation would be present here. The last one, the third column, it says it is an address or the data information or your operand. Okay, here the assembler directives are this one: equates, origin, data word, reserve, return, end. These are all your assembler directives. So we'll go through this one by one. So first, whenever your assembler it sees like sum equals 200, it would understand that this memory location, this sum, it is a label. Okay, it is a label of that particular memory location, and the address would be 200. This sum should be in the memory location 200. It would point to the memory location 200. If you could see here, sum, the address, actually the address is 200, but the label is sum over here. Next, origin 204. We'll see here. Okay, 204 is here. It says origin. So from 204 memory location, you have to put here data operands you have to put, not the instruction, just the data. Okay. Next we have n data word 100. So what this will do is like data word, it tells how many numbers you want to add. Suppose 100, right? So here n is given as 100. That means we have to add 100 numbers. Next we have num1 reserve 400. Okay. Now what does it do? Num1, from num1 you have to assign, you have to reserve 400, or you have to reserve 400 bytes. So why 400 bytes? Why? Because the assumption here is one word it contains one word it contains 4 bytes, and we need 100 numbers to be added. So 100 into 4, that is 400. That's why. So 204 plus 400, you'll get 604. So from 208 till 604, you'll be having 100 numbers, actual numbers that would be added. Okay. So those data would be present here. Again, this reserve directive, what it will do is it will just reserve this space. The actual content would not be placed here. The actual content we have to take in some form, some input procedure we have to make use, and we have to take the data. Next, origin 100. Now what this will do is like, so from the 100 memory location, your actual instructions would be present. It would be kept. Okay. Now we have okay, from here move till this one, move are not comma sum. What it will do is like it will loop through and it will add 100 numbers. Next we have end. End it would suggest is like this is the end. Okay, and it will say like, again end we have start here, right? End would suggest that it is the end of your source program, and you have to start the execution from the start is here, this location, move n comma r1. So move n comma r1, so your execution has to be started from this particular location. It suggests this n directive. Okay, so whenever the question is asked on the assembler directive, you have to say what is the assembler directive, then give this example. This memory location can be anything. Okay, just you have to take the base address and you have to go on adding 4, right? Then okay, the things which your assembler wants to know when it wants to convert the source program into the object program, then you have to give the example of the directives equates origin data word reserve, then end. Okay, so these all things has to be done for this particular question. Okay, next the question is explain the execution of assembly language program. Execution of assembly language program. The answer is 2.5.2, assembly and execution of programs. Okay, now you have to write these all things for the answer. Let me explain you this one. So your source program, it would be written in the assembly language and it has to be converted into a machine understandable readable format. So for this purpose we use a program called as assembler. Now your assembler is a program that translates your assembly language program into machine level or the object program. So the task of this assembler is it replaces all the symbols denoting the operations and addressing modes with the binary codes used in the machine instructions. And wherever the labels are present, those would be represented with the actual values. We had seen the assembler directives such as origin, reserve, and data word, right? So wherever these things are present, they would be represented with the actual values. Again, a key part of the assembly process is determining the values that replaces the name. So wherever we have the equate directive, this is a straightforward task. Sum equals 200. That means sum has to be present in the location 200, something like this. So wherever we have start or loop, that particular location has to be given. Now, your assembler, whenever it translates the source program, it scans the source program, what it will do is like it keep tracks of all the names and that associated values into a table. Okay, whenever your assembler scan through the source program, it will keep track of all the names it comes across through your source program with its associated value in a table, and that table we call it as symbol table. So whenever that particular name, if it appears for the second time, what it would do, it will not scan again, it will just check the table and replace its content with that particular value. Again, whenever your assembler it stores the object program onto the disk. So your source program, whatever you have written, it would be saved into the memory. But while execution, what will happen is, first thing, your assembler would convert it into a object program, and that particular object program, it would be present in your disk. So whenever you want to execute that particular object program, what you have to do is you have to get the object program from the disk and move it into the main memory so that the execution would be started. So for this purpose, we have a separate program called as loader. The work of the loader is it would take the object program from the disk and move it or load it to the memory. So when the object program begins executing, it proceeds to the completion if there is no errors in the program. If there is an error, syntax errors and all, so it would report that. So user can take the necessary action on them. Okay. So these all things you have to write for this question. The next one is describe programmed controlled IO operation. Okay. The answer for that is here. Basic input output operation. This is program controlled IO. Okay. The question may be explain program controlled IO or explain basic input output operation. Right. So for this you have to draw this diagram, and the diagram, again, these arrows are important. These are two-way arrows. I've seen you guys writing, I saw your assignment how you have written or drawn the diagram. So if there is any two-way arrow, you have written single arrow, or you have not given these arrow heads itself, so that would be wrong. You won't fetch marks for that. So if you want full marks for the diagram, write as is. Okay. Even these arrows are important. Remember that. And for this question, program controlled IO, you have to draw this diagram and explain this diagram, the entire thing. Okay. Again, I'm not telling you to, write whatever it is here as is. You understand the working of it and write down. Getting it? Let me explain this for you now. First, you have to write what is program controlled IO. Then, you have to explain the need of it. What is the problem? Then, you have to come for the solution. Directly do not jump into the solution. Okay. So, for this, to understand, we'll consider a task that reads a character input from the keyboard and displays the same character on the output screen. Okay. Now, the simple way of performing this IO task is to use the method known as program controlled IO. Fine. Now, the rate of data transfer from the keyboard to your computer, it is limited by the typing speed of the user. So how slowly you type or how speedily you type, that depends on you, the programmer, right, or the user. So whenever you want to, strike a key, say suppose from the keyboard you want to hit the key, yes key you want to hit, so it would take a few seconds, right, like 2 seconds, right. Now this is, the speed is very slower compared to that of the output device. So output device is much higher or much speeder than your input device. So input device speed is limited by the typing speed of the user. And in the, in the, say suppose you have taken 2 seconds to hit a key from the keyboard, the output device it would take in the same seconds, like 2 seconds, it would print or display like thousands of characters, right. Again, this is again much slower when we compare it to the processor. Your processor is capable of executing millions of instructions in a second, right. Now there is a speed difference between your input device, output device, and the processor. So we have to synchronize this entire process. For that, we will use program control IO, or the solution for that would be like having a buffer register in your input and the output device, or you say when a character has been entered from the keyboard, that has to be first moved it to the processor, or the processor it would wait for the signal saying that it would understand that a key has been pressed on the keyboard, then it has to read that key, whatever the character, it has to read that, then it has to send the character to the output. Again, it cannot directly, the processor cannot directly send the character to the output, it has to wait for the output device to become ready. So once it is ready, it can send it. Now this diagram, it shows your processor, your keyboard, and the display units, how these are connected to a bus, okay, and how the data transfer occurs between them. So what would happen is like whenever you enter something from the keyboard, it directly does not go to the display. So what will happen? Whatever you type, first it will go to the processor, and from processor it will come to the output unit or your display. So for this purpose, what we can do is like we can use for the input device, we can use a buffer register called data in and a status flag called yes in. For output device, we can use a buffer register called as data out and the status flag called as s out. Now this s in and s out, these can be these are the status register, and they would hold the value either 1 or 0. Okay, so from the keyboard, when a character has been pressed or hit, what will happen? First, its 8-bit representation would be stored in this data in buffer register. Okay, now your processor, what it would do is whenever these things are going on, it continuously it is checking the value of sin. Okay, so by default your sin would be 0. That means nothing, user has not entered anything from the keyboard. So the explanation for this is over here. Okay, this one. So whenever you hit a valid character in a keyboard, what will happen? That particular character's 8-bit representation would be stored in this data in register, and your sin would automatically become 1. So the processor which is continuously monitoring this sin, it comes to know that sin has now changed from 0 to 1. That means some valid character is present in this particular register. So what your processor does, it will read the content from the data in register, from this register. Okay, your processor, it would read the content, that is a character, from this data in. So once your processor reads the data from this data in, what will happen to SN is it would automatically become 0. Fine. Now the analogous process is that, so you have already read the content from data in or the character from your keyboard. Now that is present in the processor. Now you have to move that character to your display unit. So now display, so in the display or the output we have data out register, then we have yes out flag. Okay, status flag. So whenever this s out it is 1, your processor understands that your display is capable of receiving the character, okay, or it is free right now. So your processor under some programmed control, so it would continuously monitor the s out status. Whenever it is 1, your processor understands that display is ready to receive a character. So your processor sends that character over a bus to this data out. So once the character is present in the data out, okay, this S out would automatically becomes 0. This means, so this particular character which is in the data out would be now displayed to the user. Again, when this becomes 1, your processor understands that your display is ready to receive the second character and the process continues. Okay. So this data in, data out, yes in, S out, these are part of the circuitry. Some circuitry, it is known as device interface. Okay. So you have to write all these things for this question. The last one is explain the significance of auto increment and auto decrement addressing mode. Okay. The answer for that question is it's here 2.4.5 additional modes. Okay. Okay. So this is the easiest one, auto increment and auto decrement mode. So what happens in auto increment mode is the effective address of the operand, it is a content of a register, right? So here what you have to do is first you have to access the operand, that is the content of the register, you have to access it first. Then it would be, once you have accessed, it would be automatically incremented to point to the next item. That means how do you represent it is like, into the parenthesis you have to write the register name and then you have to write a plus sign. So this means first you have to access this operand, okay, then once you have access the operand, it would automatically incremented like +1 it would be done, so that it would point to the next instruction. Okay, now the next is auto decrement mode. So here what will happen is, how do you represent something like this, minus, then into the bracket ri, or ri is a register. Okay, so here the contents of the register is first decremented and then you have to take whatever the new content you have to take it as a effective address. So here it is written the same thing. The contents of the register specified in the instruction are first automatically decremented and then the new thing, the new address, it is used as a effective address of that particular operand. So the how do we denote it is like, first you have to write the minus sign and into the parenthesis you have to write the register name. So this is an example of your auto increment mode. So you have to write this example as well. So right, so this one. Previously what we used to do is like we use some mode like index mode or something. We used to write 4 here, some constant here, then into the bracket R2. These things we were writing it. Or uh, after this instruction we would write like add #4 to R2, something like this we used to do. But after this increment mode, what we can do is like, instead of 2 instructions we can do it in a single instruction, right? So this you have to mention. Okay, so yeah, this completes the revision of your second chapter, and from the next session we'll start with the fourth chapter. Okay, then once the fourth chapter is complete, we'll come back to the revision of third and the fourth chapter. Fine. Okay, let's end the session today then. Thank you.